Yes, Tom, you are the first in. Do you hear everything okay? How's the mix? The track and the guitar. How are you guys doing? I figured I'd jam just a little bit. And also, are you able to hear the backing track and the guitar equally, as well as my voice? Hopefully I'm not screwing this whole audio thing up. Are you guys good? Thanks, William. I see you made it. So I'm going to kind of mess around for a few minutes so we get some folks in, but if you have questions, like I know William, you had some questions on Facebook earlier, feel free to type them in, and I'll answer them as I get to spots here. Show us your guitar face. I don't know if you want to see that. That's a bad thing. I've got some of these backing tracks from the project length backing tracks. Let me see if I can find this without going through every screen here. Yeah, so this is my iPad here, and this playlist on the channel, I've got 4 tunes so far. I'm starting to build it up, but basically what they are, as you go through them, they're basically standard jazz tunes that are actually arranged for you to play over as a project, or like this one, the all blues one. You'll see it's got an intro. It gives you instructions on the screen, where the melody would be. So this is Miles Davis's tune, all blues, off the kind of blue album. All right, as you go through, I'm just going to go through kind of quickly. As you get to different sections, it'll tell you where you are in the arrangement, and then you also have like an ending that's actually been arranged, unlike most backing tracks. So this actually could work, like you can actually play over this sort of thing, and record yourself playing like you're playing with a band, which is one of the things I've been using this for with my conservatory students. This is the Herbie Hancock tune, and a little violin. I'm not going to play the melodies because I don't want any copyright issues. But I will jam over a little bit. So, how are you guys doing? This is like the end of 2020. 2020 has been kind of it's been what it's been for everybody. A sucky year. But in some ways, I figured if I was going to stay home, I would you know, work on the YouTube channel, and I've got my pedal board torn apart behind me. I'm trying to make positive stuff out of the time I've got home. But I think we're all pretty glad to have 2020 in our rearview mirror. So there's that. What I'll do is I'm going to wait till I get a few more folks in here, and then what I want to do is I've got a couple things I can teach tonight. If you're interested, depends on who's here, and if you're here, let me know who you are. I really can't tell until you make a comment, and then I can always tailor what I'm talking about to you guys. So I'm going to play some more blues. Let me go find a good blues backing track here. And a second, give me a second. I'm seriously not warmed up here. Slow blues. In D. Let's play in D. I don't do that very often. Foo tracks. Oh. invite some folks in here. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Oops, did my mouse just die? It is not raining anymore. We just had the rain, and then we had hail, and like all big Southern California storms was over in about 45 minutes. That's the extent of our bad weather, as always. Mix sounds great. Thank you. I kind of discovered that if I've got my iPad plugged in, it will play the YouTube video directly. It's got a mixer, and the mixer will actually take the iPad audio and play it directly. The only difficulty is I don't know how loud to make it for you guys, so I have a little bit of difficulty hearing it over my guitar amp. I'm still working that part out. But I've actually been using Bluetooth headphones for my some of my lessons with some of my students that have difficulty with their audio, but I don't really want to do that for this just yet. So, but thank you. Actually, it's good to know that the mix is doing okay. Question, silly question. Why for fifth string shell chords are they on consecutive strings, but you skip a string in the middle for the sixth string shell chords? I guess the biggest thing, for those of you who don't understand the idea of shell chords, we're talking about chords that are just the important notes, the root, the third, and the seventh. And if you play those three, you actually can infer or imply, I guess, the actual function of a chord. So, I can play, like if it's an A major 7, let's do C. So C major 7, right? So the notes that make up a C major 7, the chord itself is, the root is C, obviously. But as I go through, remember that our chord is built off of the root, third, fifth, and seventh notes of a major scale. So if you know your major scale, you just pick the root, the third note up, the fifth note up, and the seventh. Well, the root and the fifth are not super important to this. They don't serve a whole lot of function, especially when you're playing with other people, because what happens is that the bass player is going to be playing the root and probably the fifth a whole bunch. So what you need to do is you need to actually show us, is it a major 7 chord, which just has the third and the seventh, and together that sounds like that, or is it a dominant 7 chord, which has the lowered 7th, the minor 7th, and the third? Maybe it's a minor 7th, which has the minor 3rd and the minor 7th, right? But on the guitar, we could theoretically do this. Now, what Howie is getting at is the fact that most of the time when we play shell voicings, like it looks like this, and we skip the 5th string, right? If we've got the root on the 6th string, and that sounds pretty good. If you do it here, like here's C, that's the root, and then there's the 3rd and the 7th of C. That could be a shell voicing. I mean, it basically is a shell voicing because it's got the root, the 3rd, and the minor 7th, or major 7, and there's no 5th in there, there's no 9th, there's no other wackiness. You can get away with that partially because if you were to do those notes that close together, see how you can do that, but it's really thick. And when you're playing with other musicians, especially like if we're doing a G, right, that's not going to fit in anybody's mess. You know, there's the notes are real close together, lower in the register of the instrument. I think the harmonic overtones start kind of clashing and making a mess. All right, so that's, I think, you know, if we do it like this, well, okay, so here's the deal. We could, here's the shell voicing for like G, so root on the 6th string. A lot of times, like I learned shell voicings with the root on the 5th string as 5th, 3rd, and 7th, not even playing the root. And this is kind of how I learned how to play the Freddie Green style, like the Count Basie stuff. Oops. Actually, let me do something here. I got the wrong question up here. So this is the one that we're talking about, right? So you could go, there's G7, and if I did that, that doesn't sound too bad. But if I go where all the notes are close together, so the 3rd is actually down an octave here. Right, the open shell voicing makes a little bit more sense sonically, and it doesn't get in the way of other instruments quite as much. This one here just it's too thick, right? So that's kind of the first thing. And then You could do this for the Freddie Green thing. That works really good too. I was originally taught to do it this way, and that kind of gives you a little bit more of an open C7 chord, right? So this is C, E, and B flat, but I'm not playing the C as the lowest note. I'm playing the G, which is the 5th. All right, and that kind of clears up some of the closeness, but it's not as offensive, I think. And yes, I use the word offensive when talking about a chord voicing. When you've got the root here, because you're in a little higher register and the guitar doesn't kludge out quite as much as it does when you're down there. Okay. So this is basically, I guess I kind of just answered this. The voicing, yeah, it'd be too bassy, it'd be too muddy more than bassy. It kind of gets in the way of stuff. You're going to find later on that if you're playing with a rhythm section, like you're playing in a jazz group, and you've got someone playing a bass line. Actually, let me go back to my my all blues backing track here. If I was playing over all blues, I wouldn't play chords down here. Partially because the bass player, yeah, he's actually still playing notes in the register, right? So for me, I could do it here, but I'd rather hear it up in its own octave. And the closer you get to the top of the instrument, you can play things that aren't quite so shell voicey. Right? But you can always play all the harmony just with the 3rd and 7th. Here's the D, 7 sharp 9, B flat, D, G, right? So that's like kind of like your partial shell voicing, right? And then shell voicing, the root. There's the G, G7. Then here's my C. All right, it could be this C or this C that we're talking about. Back to the G. And when I play the D, it's that guy, or with the root. Right? But honestly, I'm not going to comp like that. That gets in everyone's way. So I will comp. All right. When I was back in school, I got really hammered on playing roots in all of my chord voicings. You know, they say, "Oh, play rootless chord voicing." Everyone's playing the root, right? So, you know, if you're playing, like, say we're playing this G7 or G9 chord right here, get rid of the root and just play the top part of the chord voicing. If I was playing C major 7, for instance, the easiest thing to do is just get rid of the C and just play the top part, right? And what that does is that kind of gets you in your own space sonically, and it doesn't double notes that are already being played a lot in the mix. All right, so we could do how we was discussing the shell voicings, but what I would do is I'd end up playing more of the other notes in the chord. So over this all blues, I can play. Let me do this. Let you see my hand here. C9, G7. All right, and then this is 7 sharp 9, E flat 7. Right. I can do that. I can play up here. Same thing, rootless chord voicing. And I can play this Mixolydian Scale. And because I'm playing the notes on the top 4 strings, I actually can play stuff that doesn't interfere with the other instruments register-wise, but still gives you a sense of what the harmony is. I can also be melodic with it, you know, with the, you know, all of this. And I could probably do a lesson just on like using chord melody for comping, right? So comping, we're talking about accompanying somebody, you know, with chords while they're soloing, and to play in a more piano way instead of like guitar. You know, as guitar players, we're playing over a swing thing. A lot of times we'll play quarter notes, like the Freddie Green idea, right? You would never strum it like any other thing. You want to stay out of the way because the bass player is probably walking quarter notes in a typical swing feel, right? And if you're not doing like mid 1940s and earlier kind of swing, Count Basie or any of that kind of music, you don't want to pound on the quarter notes. That's not what that music's about, right? Suddenly the music gets more syncopated. It gets a little bit lighter, right? And you're also you're wanting to occupy more space. Now for guitar players, you know, there's not a whole lot of us in the 1940s and early 50s playing jazz and comping. You know, piano was such a important and central element to small group jazz. It's amazing. Like there's recordings of Charlie Christian jamming with the guys at Minton's right before he died in like 1939 or so, like right at the beginning of bebop. And you've got other guys that are playing guitar. Jimmy Rainey is an early bebop guy. But it's not until the 50s that you really start getting guys, Jim Hall, Nat Moore, yeah, even like the Tal Farlows and all those kinds of people. You know, and they approached it from how a piano player would approach it. This whole big strummy thing, right? You know, that's rock and roll, right? Or country hillbilly music, right? That's not how you would play in something that's got a lighter, jazzier feel. You'll hear the rhythm sections because this comes back to the idea that we're always needing to pay attention to the context we're playing in. And you know, if you're playing in a traditional swing situation, the quarter note is really important. You know, even like the chang 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 chang, right? There's that kind of like hi-hat, and the bass drum is going quarter notes on the floor. Yeah, but in bebop and in later versions of jazz, you start having where the kick drum isn't quarter notes, right? They're dropping bombs or hitting every once in a while. The left hand is kind of like playing supportive figures on the snare drum, you know, and the ride cymbal is kind of doing a little bit, you know, busier stuff sometimes. And the bass player is still kind of holding down that kind of deal. But for guitar players, it's very much like a piano approach to playing chords, right? Which means that you have to be able to play more than just a bunch of physical shapes. And because that, you know, that's one of the things that, regardless of the style, we talk about understanding what the notes are in the voicings that you play and how to manipulate them to get new chords. Because that shouldn't be a jazz thing. That should just be a music thing. Is that making sense? Yeah, so, and I've kind of like covered this question a little bit. In rock music, you're dealing with smaller groups. There's fewer instruments typically. Also, the people that played rock music were, I don't want to say less educated about music in general, but yeah, I mean, they kind of were when you're talking about earlier rock. And it's a sound, you know, and it's an important big sound that I play a lot. Right? And I get away with that in a rock band because there's not a lot of other chord instruments. Usually, like I'm playing in trios, but even if I was playing in a four-piece band or something with a keyboard player, in that kind of music, you're playing more repetitive stuff. You're filling space differently. You're also using different sounds. That power chord, right, that fills a lot more sonic space because the overdrive, right? The overdrive or the distortion brings out all those harmonic overtones and it really thickens stuff up. Right? That's a big sound. If I got rid of that, not really the same thing, right? But if I start doing things like that with distortion, that's kind of gross, you know. That doesn't really work because you're getting too much sonic information in there. And I guess maybe that's part of it, is how much harmonic information do you need to do your job? And in a rock setting, the power chord works because you're getting a lot of other harmonic information. You don't need a lot to start with, but you're also getting a lot of the overtone stuff going on, and you're also just playing bigger, thicker sounds because you don't have as much you don't have as much competition in your register and in your range. Whereas when you're playing in a jazz context, you know, you really do have to deal with who gets how much space. And the bigger the band is rock wise, the more I have to be aware of this stuff, but it doesn't I don't have to stay out of the way as much and still support, because it's very interactive too in jazz. You know, we tend to comp the way we do in a jazz setting. All that stuff is there partially to kind of work with the soloist, right? We're filling spaces around the solo, but we're also sometimes we're playing things to kind of push them in a direction or inspire them or interact with them. You know, if I'm playing a Ramones song, that's not what it's about. It's about playing a really strong, powerful part, or like a Black Sabbath tune, or anything. You know, you're just dealing with a different vocabulary, and because of that, you run into this idea that guitar is a styles instrument, right? And what that means is that the parts on guitar may not be as difficult as they are on other instruments sometimes, but you have to have a lot more information in your head in terms of being able to play a lot of different styles appropriately. If I'm playing reggae, it's a different bag than when I'm playing jazz. It's a different bag when I'm playing country, which is a different bag, you know, than when I'm playing blues. And even within all of those styles, there's subgenres, and they all have their own vocabularies. You know, I probably know the most about blues and a little bit more about jazz, but even like if you're playing reggae and things like that, you know, are you playing, you know, 60s, 70s stuff, or are you playing more contemporary stuff, you know, and that has to do with how you voice the chord, the rhythmic ideas that you play, you know, the timbre of your instrument, where you play on the beat. Like, all of these things are part of what we have to know as guitar players. All right, so in a way, that's what makes it harder, even though sometimes the parts and the chord voicings are simpler. Okay, questions? I kind of rambled on a bit, but it's kind of a fun topic because you kind of have to realize that your guitar, it occupies a certain amount of space, and that certain amount of space is different regardless of the context musically that you're playing in, right? If I was playing like Count Basie orchestra stuff, I would definitely be playing like that kind of feel, quarter notes, maybe a little bit of an accent on the backbeats, even though it's not really backbeat music. You know, I'm playing those kinds of chord voicings. All right, as I get into the, you know, the bebop and the other styles of jazz, then I'm starting to deal with more, you know, right? But then, you know, maybe we get into later music, because at a certain point, you know, in the 60s, I guess, you have guys like Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock, and John McLaughlin, that push the vocabulary. You know, and there's a thing, because it's part of what the lesson I was kind of thinking about doing tonight, is that, you know, every style of music has its own vocabulary, and like all blues, Miles Davis, you know, he gave everybody what's essentially a blues chord progression to play over. But if you really listen to him play, he doesn't sound like he's playing blues. He sounds like he's playing modal music, right? Because what he does is he's playing the notes in those chords, and he's making melodies, but at the same time, you know, he's not playing any of the stylistic things that make a blues sound bluesy. He's not playing the greasy stuff, or, you know, he's playing concepts that work better for modal music in general. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, you know, if I'm playing, but 60s, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, guys like that, they kind of go from playing, you know, like diatonic scales, major, minor kind of stuff, more to pentatonic, you know, and it changes how they sound, right? And they're not playing pentatonic like we play pentatonic, but they've got this different vocabulary, and it's a little bit more modern and open sounding. Because a pentatonic scale, most of the distances between notes are thirds, or fourths, as opposed to thirds. So you get sounds like that. Are you talking about my mug? Yes, my Christmas present. All right, but you know, you just, as you learn each style of music, you kind of just have to learn the headspace that you need to play in to make it sound accurate. And then when you're making your own music, you got to kind of pick what you like about those different things and use them to, you know, manipulate the elements in your music to get it to what you want it to be. So, questions? I'm actually going to, I can't play the Miles Davis tune, but what I do have here is the transcription of Miles' solo, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit. You know, all blues is in 3-ish, 3 or 6, or however you want to look at it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And he plays, you know, when we talked about So What, we talked about the fact that he didn't give us the whole scale all at once on any of these sounds. He would just kind of bring in bits and pieces of it. So like in this solo, and you can go back and listen to the original recording, he's going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, and that's just root, root, and then 6 root, root. And then he plays the 4th here, which is the C. And then the next line here, he's playing B and G, which is the 3rd and the root of the G chord, right? So basically he's playing all these ideas which have to do with the arpeggio, plus a couple of notes that aren't the arpeggio to give it a little bit of more melodic movement. All right, and then so the next bit he goes F, A, G, G, right, which is kind of an enclosure where we're playing the note below the chord tone, above the chord tone, and then resolving on it. All right, usually I usually do enclosures with a chromatic note below, but this works the same way. And then he's leading into the 4 chord, into the C, and here he makes that change, and he's playing the 5 minor 7 and 9 of the C chord, because I'm thinking C already when you're that close to the chord change. And he's playing E natural. He's not playing anything bluesy. So it's the 3rd, the 5th, the 3rd of the C chord. And he plays this line. All right. And it's literally... hey, no problem, William. I'm glad you came to hang out. Yeah, he's literally playing notes that are in the C Mixolydian scale for all that, but he's not playing any blues licks. All right, and that's the thing. Like I found this online, and I love it because instead of him playing what we would all normally play, he's basically playing what he did over the So What, basically, conceptually, over this blues. All right, so if I was to take this idea, hopefully this works out. Give this a little bit of the dude pedal, since I have my all-day rocket. I'm just going up the D7, up the E flat, and back up the D. I'm basically taking a straight line through the chord changes and not really playing a scale. So if you know your chord tones, you can kind of play more like Miles on this. Because otherwise, because I can still... I've got all my traditional blues vocabulary. of that stuff is totally valid to play through a blues, and it's stuff that I would normally do, but it's not the lesson to learn from Miles playing over his modal blues on that album. All right. For me, it's always about like, hey, let's see why he sounds different, and is it something that I can use, you know? And that's really, I think that's key when you're listening to new music and you're trying to learn. Let me back up. I got a couple questions here. You know, I don't know much about Los Straitjackets, other than the fact that they wear cool wrestling masks. Bill, I think you're already gone, but goodbye, Bill. William. And no problem. Hopefully it made sense. I tend to ramble. That probably took 20 minutes for me to get from point A to point B. But I think it's important for me to know, to explain more than just this is what it is. So, you know, there's an idea, and this will be a lesson at some point in the near future. When do we play a Mixolydian scale, and when do we play a Lydian Dominant scale, right? So a Mixolydian scale, and I'll write this on the page real quick. Whoops. Because this is kind of an interesting thing to think about. I need to go through my blank guitar music. So we'll start here. All right, if I was to write out G Mixolydian, which is basically all natural notes. Sorry. So we got G. Oops. All right, so one again. All right, our half steps in a Mixolydian scale be between 3 and 4, and and 6 and 7. All right, and that's the scale that gives us a 7th chord, so that we'd play this over G7. All right, now in the key of C, right, and that's what this scale is from. When we play G7, it wants to resolve back to a C, right? So that Mixolydian scale, right? It works really great if you're playing in a place where, you know, you're in a key that's defined as resolving to its 1 chord, right? And if you're in a key, so we're going like C, D minor 7, G7, like that, right? I have to play those notes, right? But the other scale that we can look at to play over a dominant chord when the chord doesn't have to resolve, and this is way more interesting, also if you want to play the Simpsons theme, is the Lydian Dominant. It's a mode of the melodic minor scale. So 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, right? So 1, 2, 3, raised 4, 5, 6, 7, back to the 1. All right, we have half steps between 4 and 5, and 6 and 7. All right, so we still have the notes that may, oops. What happened to my, we still have the notes that make this a G7 chord. I probably should say this is minor 7. All right, but that note, the 4th note of the scale, which really is there to resolve down to the 3rd of the 1 chord. Like when I'm playing G7, that seventh right there wants to fall down. It falls the half step into the one chord, right? If we play that 4 as a sharp 4, let me think for a second. Yeah, that works. I'm sorry, I had to think for a second. But that sharp 4, it gives us a much more interesting thing to play over just a static dominant chord. All right. So if I'm not playing over something in a key, so let's just say we'll do G7 backing track, and this will probably end up being some sort of funky thing. Right, so that is G Mixolydian. Right, I always thought it works, kind of boring. But if you raise the 4th a half step, now we've got something a lot more interesting. And it sounds like the Simpsons. So I love that note. Great, but the problem is it doesn't work in every setting. All right, the best example, there's a song called Little Sunflower. Let's see if I can hear. All right, and it's a modal tune. And the thing with this is that it's got a whole, I don't know, it's like 16 bars of D minor. All right, and then the bridge goes E flat major, D major, E flat major, D major. And what you find is, and this is basically talking about the Lydian more than the major. Kind of getting these a little confused today. But the Lydian scale works really good over the E flat because it's not in that key, whereas once you get down to the D major 7, you really need to play like a regular major scale right there, right? I've just confused you guys with this, but check this out. I'll play a little bit over this. Hopefully this sounds good. So this is very Dorian. There's that sharp 4 from Lydian. And this regular major for the D. Alright, and then you feel that the major scale, because over the D the major scale kind of resolves a little bit better. Because you're dealing with the 1 chord. All right, that's basically where it ends up falling. But any place, like if you're playing in a song where you're in a key and then there's a major 7 chord that's outside of the key, or that just isn't the 1 chord really, because that's any major 7 chord, you can play Lydian over that. Right, and then over dominant chords, to me that Lydian dominant sound has to be over any dominant chord that's not a 5 chord in a key. Does that make sense? But it gives you these really great options in terms of sounds to play, especially like G7 funky. Let's see what this one is. I need to make more of these backing tracks for my own stuff. food for thought. That's one of those I'm kind of workshopping a lesson out on you guys. it's like I get people asking like, when do we play Lydian or when do we play Lydian Dominant? And that's what it comes down to, is that you play those sounds when you're not really having to play functionally in a key, I guess. It's the best way to look at it. So cool. Who is here still? It's always kind of weird to do these because I never know like how many people are here. I thought I would have tonight, but it's being sent USPS. I got on this whole J Rocket kind of thing over the last several months. Actually, it's not just now. Let me actually, I can split my one of these. Will give me the oh, it should be 4. Okay. What I can do is I can show you guys my small pedal board down here. Yes, I'm wearing socks. And the pedals down here are, actually, before I do anything, Oscar. Absolutely. And then, you know, I don't do wine or smooth jazz really. I'm kind of a bourbon and blues, or bourbon and bebop or swing kind of guy. Occasionally beer. I like that. Yeah, you know, you have different ways of looking at this stuff. You have a lot of approaches that you can use. All right. Real quick though, because I've been talking about these. So here's my amp sound. Clean. It's not super loud right now. This guy's a tuner, which, you know. But I had the dude has kind of been one of my favorite. You can't really see it, but it's basically, I guess it's supposed to be their version of like a Dumble kind of a sound. Right. So it works great. Like if I'm going to bring the gain down a whole bunch. If I only had one pedal and I had to take it to a gig, I'd probably bring one of these. Because that's the low gain. All right, and then as you bring the gain up, that was at 1/4, this is about half. It makes a great lead sound. All right, and then even more, you know, I can kind of, like if I had to play some 80s stuff on a gig, I only had the one pedal. All right, so it's a pedal that like throughout the range of the gain, it actually gives me a lot of useful sounds. All right, I usually have it probably about halfway maybe, and it's usually more of like my lead sound, saturated lead. That's usually, and that's kind of, that works really good for me. The 45 caliber is kind of like their JTM 45 Marshall. Right. Probably over the internet this doesn't sound a whole lot different. But it's basically like a little Marshall kind of thing. So on a small pedal board, I could have a lead sound and then a rhythm crunch. It works pretty good for that. Cleans up decently as you roll the volume back. If I bring the volume back, let's see what we get here. It's gain. I don't know if I love it that much. These are just real useful sounds on a gig, you know. Here's halfway up. And then halfway up. And then all the way up. You can play solos with it. I like it more as a rhythm. Get a little bit more gain here. It also depends on how loud the amp is. The amp's pretty quiet. All right, and then the newest one I got is the Archer, which is kind of their clone. Right, and you know, I like using it like you normally use a clone. You know, basically it just brings up that upper mid a little bit. So even like if I'm here, and I kick that on, it kind of gives me a little bit more of that mid-range, you know. I know, it's cool. It kind of focuses things a little bit more, gives me a little bit more of a lead sound without it being too much louder. Even like with the dude. So they stack pretty well. Although I kind of like the dude by itself. That was supposed to be here yesterday and is being traveled around by the U.S. Postal Service. As I got one of their blue notes, I saw Sean Tubbs talking about how it makes a great like neck pickup lead sound. How is the stream? I'm getting these little notices that my my internet connection is not doing so great tonight. But anyway, like I'm really happy with all of these pedals. It's rare, like when I get a pedal from some company and I like more than one pedal. And I usually try. Like I'll end up like Exotic or someone. I'll buy something and I'll buy a bunch of them and hate everything except for the original one. These J-Rocket ones are great though. The Dude and the Archer are going to be on my big pedal board, and then the 45 caliber is actually it's what I would use the Origin Revival drive for. That's what this guy does on my big board. But on the small board, the 45 caliber and the Blue Note will be a really good kind of boost. So I'm excited about that. I don't know. I'm just like, I feel like eventually we'll get back to playing gigs. We're closer to playing gigs than we are the era where we had to quit playing gigs, I think. And I really trying to get all my stuff kind of fixed and dialed in. I sold a bunch at the beginning of the quarantine, partially because I needed to get my studio up and rolling. And now I need to replace a bunch of that stuff if I want to be able to play. And what I usually do is I usually end up like waiting to the last minute, like throwing a bunch of stuff together and I'm never happy. Whereas right now I'm just planning things out and trying to make sure that this stuff actually works and sounds good together before I get to a gig. Doug, Mixo and... Yeah, and there's just, between the two scales, there's really only one or two differences there, right? Well, there's really only one difference, which is the sharp 4. But one of the ways that you can really nail that sound down is through triad pairs. All right, so I can take, like if I'm playing over this G7, if I really want to say, hey, I'm playing Mixolydian, instead of just going up and down the scale, I can play G major and an F major. And I've talked about this before. Alright, and those two triad pairs like hit all the important notes. All the notes in G gets the 7th. Alright, but if I want to say, hey, you know what, let's get more of that Lydian Dominant sound. Right, the triad pair is G and A, right? So instead of the 1 chord and then a major triad off of the minor 7 of the scale, you triads off the 1 and the 2, but it's got to be a major 2 triad. Alright, so now I'm playing G major, sound too, instead of just trying to play the scale all the way up and down. Once again, it's about extracting the important parts and working with it. So. Okay, so it looks like I only have a small handful of people here. If you guys want me to keep going, or if you have more questions, let me know. Otherwise, I might finish my coffee and then go make some cocktails with my wife. But I'm as far as like the J Rocket pedals go, I'm really happy with them. I have one open space on the big pedal board, and I'm almost thinking about just getting some kind of fuzz I've never had before. Like I've never had any kind of big muff style pedal. I've never had any kind of rat pedal. I've had fuzz face style fuzzes, and they're awesome and stuff, but part of me just wants to try something different. And I think like the whole idea of like David Gilmour with a fuzz face or with a big muff kind of pedal might be a sound that I'm excited about at this point in time. Something worth trying. So if you guys have any input on that, let me know. I think Howie probably does. So cool. All right, guys. I'll probably end it here tonight then. Hopefully you're all having a good and safe New Year. And then I'll be back on Saturday morning, my usual Saturday morning. I'm kind of liking pulling apart classic solos and talking about the concepts behind them. And I think I'm able to do it without infringing on anyone's copyrights. So who knows? The Miles Davis one we just did was pretty cool. I like the simple ones like that. I don't know. If you have suggestions for stuff, let me know. I try and get stuff that's really simple because then it's easier to use it as a vehicle to teach others stuff. So just kind of keep that in mind. So, all right, guys. Have a good one. Have a good New Year, and I will see you on Saturday.